152 Show, Episode 2. Today we're going to talk dominant wrestlers at the New York State Tournament. So let me start off by saying that anybody who wins a New York State Championship is a good wrestler. Now, there's always debates online about who's the best state. Some people say New York is trash. I will debate anybody who disagrees with me. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. But anybody who wins a New York State title, they could go to national tournaments, Super 32, Fargo, Virginia Beach. They're going to defend themselves. They're going to do good. They're going to battle for a championship. They're going to place. With that being said, there's always a couple of wrestlers that cement themselves above that, right? They make the New York State Championship, the tournament, look like a JV tournament, getting bonus points every single match, right? Now, some people that come to mind to me in years past is guys like Brian Robuto, packing everybody up. Bonus points, majors, pins, techs. Shakura Sheed, same thing. Pins, majors, techs. Yanni Diakomahalis. The list goes on. Now, these are the guys that are going to these national tournaments like Super 32, Flow Nationals when it was a thing, Virginia Beach, and they were winning. They weren't just, the other guys, like I said, a New York State champion, they're going to go there, they're going to defend themselves. But these guys, they're winning. They're going to these national tournaments and they're winning. So those are some guys that come to mind for me. Now, I want to talk about this year's tournament. Who the most dominant wrestler was in the New York State 2026 championship. Now, for me, there's three people that come to mind. If you did your research, if you looked at the brackets, if you were there at the tournament, there's three people that could have the title for the most dominant wrestler at the state championship. This isn't a question of who the best wrestler is. This is a question of who was the most dominant at the tournament. Because if we're asking who's the best wrestler at the New York State Championship, I think there's only one clear-cut answer. And that wrestler is Cameron Howard. Now, once again, if you disagree with me, let me know in the comments section. Send me a DM and Instagram. We could talk about it. We could debate it. But I believe Cameron Howard is the pound-for-pound best wrestler in New York State right now. And the reason for that is he has the highest ranking in the national ranking, right? I believe right now he's ranked number 2. He went to Who's Number 1. He won. You already know you have to be ranked, 1 or 2 to even wrestle in the Who's Number 1, to even be invited to wrestle there. So Cameron Howard was not just invited. He went and he won his match. He also won Fargo. He's done a lot in the off season. I believe he was a world team member for like one of the U15s. So Cameron Howard is the best wrestler, but did he have the most dominant tournament? That's the question. So we already know out of the three, right? Cameron Howard is one of them. Now, the other two wrestlers who I believe could have had the most dominant tournament is Devin Downs at 215 from Plain Edge and Chris Belmonte at heavyweight 285. So we're going to go through the results here. We're going to let's start with 215, Devin Downs, right? So Devin Downs just won his 3rd state title. So super stud, right? You win 3 state titles in New York. You a damn good wrestler. So here, Devin Downs literally pinned every single one of his opponents, right? First match versus Brentwood, fall in 1 minute. Second match against Section 3, Carthage, fall, 1 minute 17 seconds. Okay. Semifinals. Now, I watched this match up close. This was a freshman from St. Francis. It was another pin, right? 4 minutes, 45 seconds, but this freshman is tough, and he gave Devin Downs a little bit of problems in the beginning of the match, right? I remember thinking like, yo, this kid's a freshman, and he's giving Devin Downs, some struggle here. So shout out to, what's his name? Dosh from St. Francis, but still another pin. And then in the finals, Devin Downs pins Phillip from Menacing Valley. Another pin, 2 minutes and 43 seconds. Now, Phillip is somebody that I watched. I actually broke down one of his matches from the dual meet state championship. And I remember thinking, yo, Phillip is good. Like, he's going to give Devin Downs some problems. Like, that's what I was thinking, right? But nope, pin, right? And I'm going to show you guys right here some of the stuff that Phillip was hitting in the match that I broke down. Like, he looked good. He was 215. He was wrestling like a lightweight. I'm thinking, yo, he's got the technique. He was hitting reshots. He was doing stuff that I like to see, right? Stuff that I look for wrestlers that are going to go to the NCAA's Division I and do damage. And that's the type of technique that Phillip was hitting. But Devin Downs packed him up. 2 minutes and 43 seconds. So Devin Downs had 2 first period falls, and then the semifinal and the final match made it out of the first period, but they were still pins. So I would consider that an extremely dominant tournament. So that's the case for Devin Downs there, right? Now let's go to 285. This is Chris Belmonte, right? Now the case for Belmonte to be the most dominant wrestler at this tournament is he pinned all 4 of his opponents in the first period. So we have first match against Amityville, full, 1 minute and 15 seconds. Second match against Section 5, Victor, full, 1 minute and 26 seconds. Third match against Morrow, who I believe was a state runner-up last year. So this is a quality opponent. This is somebody who made it to the state championship, to the state final, in last year's tournament. And Belmonte pinned him in 46 seconds. And then in the final, a pin in 36 seconds. So Belmonte literally made quick work of all 4 of his opponents. Now, the question here is, this is heavyweight. Now, I don't want to penalize him for being a heavyweight wrestler. He's heavyweight, right? You can't penalize somebody for that. Some people might argue that the quality of wrestling at heavyweight is not as good as the lighter weights, which, the technique is definitely not as good, but that's what he weighs. You can't penalize him for weighing 285, for being a heavyweight. So in his division, for his weight, he was extremely dominant. Like I said, 4 pins in the first period. Also, the crowd was definitely feeling Belmonte. He came with energy. He made quick work of his opponents. The crowd, he came out with the vibrato and all that. I watched him in the crowd. Everybody was wilding. They were going crazy for Belmonte. Super dominant. Now, let's move on to 157 pounds. Cameron Howard, who we already spoke about some. Now, Cameron Howard, his 4 matches, right? So we have a pin in the first match, 53 seconds. Okay. Second match, tech fall. Okay. Third match in the semifinals, another tech fall. And in the finals against George Johnson, who's a very good wrestler, another tech fall. Now, I want to see, I believe the wrestler that he faced in the semifinals was all state last year. So in last year's tournament, Chris Noka of Horace Greasley took 4th place, okay? And Cameron Howard faced him in the semifinals and teched him, okay? Now in the finals, he faced George Johnson. Now, George Johnson is another wrestler that I broke down one of his matches during the year. He was the Eastern States champion. And I remember thinking in when I broke down that match, I'm like, yo, this guy's good. He's got some stuff. And then in the state tournament, when I watched George Johnson's 4 matches, he was extremely dominant as well. And George Johnson was moving. His body language was like, yo, I can beat Cameron Howard. So I remember watching him saying like, okay, maybe George Johnson is going to give Cameron Howard a match, right? And in the final, right, George Johnson, he was keeping up with Cameron Howard in the beginning, right? First period. But as the match went on, Cameron Howard you can't keep up with that pace, right? He just started, the beginning, he was working for the takedowns. Cameron Howard, he had to work hard. As the match kept going on, the takedowns just got easier and easier and easier for him. And like I said, this is against George Johnson, who I believe is a very good wrestler, right? From Catholic school, from Iona Prep. Even if you look at George Johnson's matches, right, it was, what do we got here? So a pin and a major decision for George Johnson, right? No, it was a tech fall, a pin, and a major decision for George Johnson. So he was extremely dominant himself. And Cameron Howard he teched him in the state finals. So the question here, guys, is each wrestler has a reason as to why they could be the most dominant wrestler. So the question here is, what do you guys hold to a higher standard, right? So like I said, for Belmonte, it was 4 first period pins. So that's like that's why he could be considered the most dominant wrestler. 4 first period pins. Now, Devin Downs, it was 4 pins. 2 of them in the first period. The other 2 were later on in the match, but he pinned a very good Phillip from Menacing Valley in the final, who had a great season himself. So that's basically, it's the quality of wrestlers that he pinned, Devin Downs, right? Especially in the final, the quality of that wrestler that he pinned was very good. But also Belmonte pinned a state runner-up last year as well. So, and then we have at 157, Cameron Howard was just teching everybody. So another question is, what do you guys consider more dominant, a tech fall or a pin? A tech fall is, I feel like in wrestling, the ultimate way to win is a pin, right? You're literally holding somebody on their back, right? So that you're completely controlling your opponent. But a tech fall is like the name tech. It's like a technical showcase of how good you are, that you beat this guy by so many points that they stop the match. So it really comes down to, what do you guys consider as more dominant? Tech falls, because Cameron Howard was teching everybody and teched a very good George Johnson, or is it pins? Is pins more dominant? And then for Belmonte, like I said, he even took it a step further and pinned all 4 of his opponents in the first period, in the first minute. So I want you guys to let me know in the comment section, who do you think was the most dominant wrestler at the 2026 New York State Championship? And let me know if I'm missing somebody. If there was somebody on the D2 side, or if there's somebody in D1 that has a case to be the most dominant wrestler that I'm overlooking, let me know. But I love to debate this type of stuff. I want to hear what your guys' opinion is. What your guys' opinion is. Was it Cameron Howard? Was it Devin Downs? Or was it Chris Belmonte?
Wrestling gang, what up?